of the we're on the side of God. And I think it explained British imperialism. We're fighting for God here. Those horrible French don't believe in God. Yeah, come on, they're all Freemasons. They're all good people. And I think poor old Napoleon's had a bad rap from history. He was into science. He sponsored higher education here in France, and he believed in the grand architect. So that's why he set up and he took a whole bunch of scientists to Egypt. So he founded Egyptology. So it's really interesting, and there's I've got a big library on the history of Freemasonry here. You can dive into it. I suspend judgment on which is ultimately true. Point of the table isn't to make a value judgment and say this is better than the others. It's just to present to scholars and students, these are the ones, you choose from them, pick and mix, really. When I'm in France, I'm a Grand Orient guy. When I go back to London, I'm, with the other side. Okay, does that explain a bit?
Yeah, one of these groups are supposed to, what I understand is that they have a huge, profound knowledge about symbolism and architecture, of course, like Chartres, for example.
Yes.
It is supposed to be, I heard, the most perfect cathedral ever. These groups, they both share this kind of knowledge, like or
both types of
even secular or deist, like
yes, they both
they know, they have access to the same.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they share the same symbological imagination.
And is that a rivalry? What is the word? Is there a controversy, like in the way it's?
I think there is a rivalry between them, and the irony is that Brexit was part of this story because the British were going off saying, we're the best nation, we're under God, European Union's secular, we don't like them. And most people don't realise this is part of the script. I've been calling for a healing and reconciliation between these factions, and I'm opposing Brexit because I think it's stupid. It's like, imagine we're trying to build a European continent, including Britain, and at peace. We've succeeded for 50 years. And different people have different diagrams and different maps how we get there. So why should one group go off stealing their plans and dissing the other lot and calling those people, evil or whatever? We should be sharing our knowledge and ideas within the wider European Union. That's what I believe. And all the Freemasons should work together. I've for years wanted to organise a conference bringing these two factions together.
What is the impediment?
Just not enough hours in the day.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought they didn't want to. But this frontier, let's say, or this space in which this violence emerges or this disagreement is. Where is it? Is it God? Is it?
Well, it's connected with the God story and the idea of God. So yes, I mean, to heal that is a big one,
Yeah.
But that's one of the many things I'm working on here. And the point of the periodic table is to highlight the works that's needed for healing. So let's get on with it. Yeah. Right. Thank you, Kitty. Let's move to your one. 142. Yes. Well, this is a very exciting one. 142, postmodernism, and yes, I mean, I've obviously it's very much a European intellectual movement, and not to say even French, associated with this French philosopher called Lyotard, particularly, who started introducing the term postmodernism, and I've always approached postmodernism with some skepticism as a movement in philosophy, because basically what my understanding of postmodernism is that it teaches that there's no possibility of a grand theory of all knowledge anymore, because there's too much knowledge. And so Lyotard said that the human condition now is that we've outgrown the possibility of real knowledge. We can only know fragments. We can be a medical doctor who specialises in bone surgery, and you can know a lot about that. But you can't know even everything about medicine. It's just too much knowledge. So you have to have specialists, let alone, say, chemists. You can't know everything about chemistry anymore. It's just too much to know. So you end up specialising in the chemistry of, organic chemistry of mollusks. Even that, there's a lot to learn about, you know, like specialists can spend years writing learned papers about organic chemistry of mollusks. So it seemed, and so postmodernism, I think, starts from a mistaken assumption that you can quantify knowledge. I believe knowledge is a qualitative phenomena, and I've written this huge book called Being and Knowledge as an existentialist epistemologist, trying to say that knowledge is a qualitative thing. And I think the mistake of the scientific revolution was to quantify it all, as if that's the last word in knowledge. I think the real knowledge that we need as human beings is value, meaning, passion, love of knowledge. These can't be quantified. These are qualitative experiences which the human soul can have. And mere science cannot cope with them. That's why I wrote my book on mathematics and religion, is really to prove that maths can't cope with religion. And I think that the mistake of the postmodernists is to think, is they predefine what is knowledge as pure science. They then say, well, science can't cope with anything, can it? Therefore, by definition, knowledge, we can't do it anymore. So let's talk about postmodernism, because the modern era, they say, was about trying to master everything. Okay, so I say to them that they've made certain category errors there. And I'm much more with the original beginners of the university system in Europe, like Aquinas, who tried to master all knowledge as an act of service to the divine intellect. So you put your human intellect at the service of the cosmic mind, which has mastered all knowledge. That's the faith. You then ask that divine intelligence to let you see what you need to know to help fix that situation. Gaza, Ukraine, whatever. So you become an instrument of the divine knowing, you know, in this broken and fractured world. And I think the danger of the postmodernist movement in philosophy is that all is thrown out the window. There is no divine intelligence. Prove it. You can't measure it. It doesn't exist. And that, I think, is a mistake. So that's. I mean, I could go on about that, but you know, I think it's been chasing down the wrong rabbit hole, this whole postmodernist thing. And I prefer to talk about pre-modernist. I'm a pre-modernist philosopher because we haven't yet got to the modern world where we will have universal peace, where we will have universal human rights, where we will have equality between the genders, where we will have honour between men and women, we will have truth as the guiding principle of politics. We haven't got there yet. And yet I think the great thinkers of philosophy like Kant and Hegel and the other people I respect, and Aquinas and all the rest, they saw glimpses of it coming. So when Kant wrote about the possibility of universal peace in Europe, you know, he was catching a glimpse of the future, which hasn't yet come into being. So it doesn't mean we throw away the ideals and say, oh, well, can't do it, postmodernism, you know, nobody can know anything. Let's just go down the cafe and get drunk, you know. No. Let's stand faithful to the vision of the pre-modernists and work for a world that hasn't yet been born. But anyway, that's my take on it. Would you like to answer or riposte, or how do you see it?
The reason I chose postmodernism is that when you first introduced this table, you said that one of the aims of the table is to find similarities and commonalities, common ground between what is written on the table. So I intentionally chose postmodernism because it seems to be, in itself, the ideology, especially the believers, young believers of postmodernism, what they attack the most is lots of the religious belief and the movements. So I'm curious, what are the possible common grounds that they could achieve because especially postmodernism has been such a growing trend affecting European youth. And now maybe some parts of the East Asian developed youth group too. So how can you persuade them that there could be a lot of common ground that they are seeking between people outside of their group?
Well, it's not impossible. I mean, truth is the universal common ground of all of us. And I mean, you could argue that Buddha was a postmodernist thinker because he rejected the conventional religion of his day, and he adopted a sort of universal skepticism towards. But he didn't. He still maintained there was the possibility of enlightenment, which is not a. The postmodernists reject this, as far as I understand it. I mean, I may be wrong. And so I think what they've done, these youth, and I feel sad, this sort of, I regard it as a kind of nihilistic movement in philosophy. They've walled themselves into like a dead end street, and it's time to take a leap of transcendental epoche back to the possibility of a common ground, you know. And I don't think that labour should be done all from the religious thinkers' side. I think the postmodernists themselves have to do some work here. I'd love to, you know, engage in debate with any philosophers that want to appear, and you know, we can have this out in a rational discourse. But what I don't accept is their whole premise, which is ruling out all this discourse as meaningless. You know, that is the that I think is something we have to grow out of because it's not viable. I think it's also connected with, if you don't mind me saying so, there's a whole other thing about the European mind's ability to colonialise other peoples and continents and then look down on them. So the French intellectuals who looked down on, say, Islam, whilst colonising North Africa and Lebanon and so on, you know, it gives an ideological justification to diss them because, oh, they're just religious nutters, you know. Whereas we French, we're postmodernists, we're really clever, we're scientists. How dare they fight back, you know? So the Algerian War and stuff. So I think we should revisit the roots of postmodernist thought in the context of decolonialising the mind of the planet. And I think we have to recognise that Chinese traditional knowledge, Japanese traditional knowledge, Christian traditional knowledge, you know, of the Palestinian Christians. I mean, they may not, you know, be as sophisticated as the French intellectuals sitting in a Paris caf, but they have a right to not be bombed. And therefore we have to find a bridge of humility, I believe, and to our Muslim brothers and sisters, you know. And I think René Guénon tried. He's a French intellectual I greatly respect. He wrote a very interesting critique of the modern mind called The Reign of Quantity. If you don't know René Guénon's work. And he said the trouble with the modern European mind is all they want is numbers, quantity. Whereas, like me, he says what matters is quality. You only need one number, one. There's only one number, actually. All the others are subdivisions. So if you start from oneness, unity, you have everything. You have infinity. Because you can subdivide the one infinitely. And that's the point of René Guénon's Sufism, which we're moving on to shortly, I believe, in our study. Anyway, I hope that answers some questions. And indeed, the next one is Sufism. René Guénon became a Sufi because he wanted to, you know, make an act of solidarity with the third world, with the poor, with the displaced, with the not very intelligent people, and get away from this Western arrogance. And he became a Sufi, and his spiritual biography is fascinating. He studied in Morocco, he ended up living in Cairo, and he, you know, a great man. I obviously never met him, but I know people that did. What is Sufism? 83. So, yes, Sufism starts from the assumption that Muhammad was a valid prophet and had something to teach humanity, that he was an inspired genius who downloaded from the heavenly library certain wisdom, which is of universal, eternal value to humanity. And what I've tried to do in my commentary on the Quran is go through that line by line and explain what that is, why it, and where it came from, by applying transpersonal psychology, which explores this idea of divine inspiration rationally, and which looks at things like, altered states of consciousness, psychedelics. I mean, we humans can tap into a cosmic mind. Well, Muhammad obviously did. And I've tried to explain as a historian how that might have happened. What was the context? We know that he was, although he was based in Mecca, he worked for his wife, Khadija, running the caravan trade out of Mecca. And we know that he went on work to important places like Damascus, which was a haven of all kinds of religions. Also down to the Yemen, almost certainly, and across to Hira, which was in southern Iraq, which was a metropolis run by the Lakhmid Arab dynasty of Christians. And you found there Nestorian Christians and Gnostics. You found Manichaeans and you found Zoroastrians, because it was the trade route to the Persian Empire. And I could just see Muhammad sitting in a cafe in Hira, chatting to all these people, and just his mind on fire. Yeah, but we need a new prophet, don't we? I mean, you say Zoroaster, you say Jesus, you say Moses, you say Mani. Well, what's happening now? So he went back and meditated on this. And he got some amazing downloads. People that diss Islam and diss Sufism, they have never studied it, I've discovered. They just have a racist superiority thing. We're Europeans. We're beyond all that. And I think it would be very good for people to study this. I encountered Sufism in my early spiritual journey and met some real masters and was initiated and just learned enough to know that there's something to all this, which is why I wrote my commentary on the Quran. And I just tear my hair out now. But I think Israel is doing some very naughty stuff in its complete attack on Islam and on Sufism and on the possibility of wisdom there. They should be honouring the local indigenous people, the Palestinians, not killing them. They should be sitting at their feet and learning and saying, well, hey, we escaped the Holocaust. We've come to live in your land. How can we live together? How can we design a peace plan? The trouble is that the people that are running Israel, the Netanyahu lot, are these extremists who aren't spiritual at all. They have no knowledge or no faith in anything about what I'm talking about. And that's really, really sad. So we have problems here. What's the Sufi response? Yes. Well, patience. One of the key words in the Quran is sabr. It's something that a true Muslim has to have, which is divine patience, divinely guided patience, that things will work out. And in God's good time, I don't believe that fighting back violently, I think Hamas made a fatal error in attacking Israel. I don't believe, I've always been calling for the Palestinian resistance movement to use non-violence only as a strategy, to adopt non-violence, and then that disarms the enemy. The more you use violence, then the more violence is done back to you. So I would say to my Muslim brothers and sisters in Palestine to use non-violence, but that's an active thing. It's not a sort of passive thing. And I do know some great Palestinian intellectuals who are trying to do that. We should be supporting them. And the West should have been supporting them all this time. We seem to have this weird thing going on, particularly in America, that somehow we have a contract with the Jewish people to support them 100,000%, whatever they do. And we don't have any duties or right towards our Muslim brothers and sisters. Well, that's totally wrong. It's just anti-human. And it's against common sense and rationality, in my opinion. And, I know many great American intellectuals who would agree with me. So I think let's all go back to do our homework, listen to my commentary on the Quran, persuade your friends to listen to it, and I think you'll realise that we're better off making peace between Christians, Muslims and Jews in a harmony. And that's what they've been calling for, you know. I mean, the Sufi tradition was inspired by Pythagoras, by Plato. They adopted Greek philosophy. The Islamic schools of philosophy are very deep and profound. They love Plato's unity idea because it fits with the Quran. God is a unity. And then Mullah Sadra, the greatest Islamic thinker of Persia, emphasised the divine unity as well. Mm-hmm. So what's not to like here? I think if we got back to that, we would, you know, we could make peace intellectually, spiritually. And you can stay whatever your outer religion. It's more an inner commitment to honouring the source. That's what Sufism's about. Okay, so it's a very important one. Thank you for choosing that. Appreciate that, George. Okay, now we come to our last one. Do you have any questions about that, by the way, anyone? Is that okay? Yes. 141, pacifism of the Christian variety. Yes, that's an important one as well. It's the last of the Christian ones because I was composing the table and I realised that I hadn't gone in and they deserve to be honoured. There is a strong tradition in Christianity and it surfaces every now and then. In the first centuries of the church, they were all pacifists. In what I mean by that is they weren't prepared to take part in physical killing and war. They believed that Christ's message was one of peace and that you therefore had to take a non-violence approach. And looking back, it's absolutely incredible that they maintained that even though as they were being martyred by the Roman state. The Roman Empire hated that, saw it as a threat. And it killed them, and it tortured them, and it burned them alive, and it slaughtered them, starting with Nero, who did it for fun, burned them alive in Rome, because they were peace lovers. And the whole Roman imperial military machine was premised on war and militarism. So these Christian pacifists were a threat, as was Christ himself, you know, the founder of it all. So I think that's very shocking, and I've got an unfinished project of a book which would document all the Christian martyrs of those first centuries. We know them as saints. They all came to a bad end, like St. Catherine, and they were all tortured. I'd like to see that studied scientifically, like how many were killed, why, what happened, you know. And it was just they were refusing to engage in the Roman military regime. Okay, that was that period. Then the Roman Empire became so-called Christian under Constantine. So you then had this idea of being a loyal Christian soldier serving the empire. And that was a tightrope that has proved problematic, I think, ever since. We see its latest manifestation in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Putin claims to be a Christian, but he then thinks it's fine to launch a war against a fellow Christian country of Ukraine. But that's kind of what Roman Constantinian Christianity does. And I think that's a corruption of the original thrust of Christ's teachings, which are embodied in the pacifist tradition. So then it bubbles up in others. So for instance, in the Quaker period, in the English historical 17th century, there was a huge war between different factions. Catholics are fighting, Irish were fighting, Protestants were fighting, Cromwell was there, the Anglicans, you know, everyone was having a fight. And George Fox said, he received these spiritual guidances. He said, no, this is against Christ's teachings. We should not kill. We should not serve in the war. And he'd been a colonel in Cromwell's army, but he grew out of it. And the Quakers then became quite influential. And, you know, I've studied them, and I've been a Quaker attender on and off for like 20 years. In Canada I was a Quaker, and I think they have a lot of wisdom. the Moravian Brethren, other pacifist churches are still going. And we're working for peace. You know, it inspired my work as a pacifist. But the word pacifist is misunderstood. It doesn't mean someone that just lies down and accepts to be walked all over. It's someone who makes peace. Pacifist is from two Latin words, to peace and to make. Facere is to make. So a pacifist is someone that makes peace, which puts a whole different slant on it. Here in France, there have been Christian pacifists. My favourite is Lanzo del Vasta, a Gandhian follower. And also, obviously, Gandhi advocated what we would call pacifism. As a lived, you know, opposition to injustice through righteousness. So he's opposing the British Empire's cruelty in India. Sometimes, sadly, they were cruel, like in the Amritsar massacre. So he said, no, let's get rid of them peacefully, non-violently. And he led that resistance. And he inspired me a lot. I worked with the Gandhi Foundation. And he was supported by Christian pacifists who went to India and worked with him, vicars and things. I've been on the council of the Anglican Pacifist Fellowship, which is a small group of us in the Church of England that follow this tradition. And there's another group called Pax Christi, which is the Catholic version. I wish there were more Christian pacifists, you know. Well, I put 25 million. I mean, maybe among the Christian church, which is like 2 billion, there might be about 25 million who are aware of what I'm talking about and have reflected on this. But then the other argument is, well, no, if there's evil, you've got to stand up to it and you've got to fight. So in Ukraine, there are people saying, there are some Christian pacifists saying, you know, that, Tolstoy, but there are others saying, no, we've got to fight Putin. He's attacked us. We have the duty to defend our land. I would say, as a Druid, because we were pacifists as well, we didn't fight, that we can fight intellectually and we can do resistance of ideas, and they're actually more effective. We can. I've written a book on magic. Can you pass me that red book there on the table? Yeah, yeah. So I've written this book about magical peacemaking. I've argued that pacifists should like have another level of non-violent resistance. So Gandhi invented like the fast. Well, he didn't invent it, but he applied it to peacemaking. The demonstration, the march, the boycott, these are all tried and tested, like Martin Luther King did the same. But I'm saying we have to get a bit more sophisticated because that's not working. We've got like Trump and weird stuff going on the planet. We've got Putin, we've got Netanyahu. How are we going to dislodge those types of people using those old strategies? It doesn't work. They've been tried against Netanyahu. He just bulldozes people's homes. And Putin does the same, just blows up the houses. So I'm saying let's take it up a notch to the magical level and do magical peacemaking. And I've written a whole book, a manual on how to do that, because I'm the peace druid of Europe, so that's my duty, right? And many Christians and druids, you know, we work together. So anyway, there we are. That's that one. Is that all right? I think they're all really interesting, what we've done here today. And we'll just finish with one. We'll choose one from the girls. You can have a god. These are the tarot of the gods, which I designed. And then we'll have one from the blokes, and we'll see which you get, right? So if you, maybe the person in the middle, if you all shuffle them a bit, and then let her choose, right?
We all shuffle.
Yeah, a little bit, and then she can choose. Yeah.
I give Kitty
Yeah,
to shuffle,
Kitty
and
to
then
shuffle a bit, and
you
then
would,
Heidi
last.
can choose the card. So these are the Tarot of the Gods. It's the first ever card set of male deities. So we're invoking a
Male
particular god on this human predicament we're in.
4, ace. Oh,
Okay,
Ace fear.
yeah, Thor. You've got Thor.
Thor.
Thor, who's the ace of the earth. The cards are in earth, air, fire, water. And this is the great Scandinavian god Thor, which gives his name to Thursday. Thor's Day. Okay. Can you pass it across to the blokes? And you can do the same.
So
yeah.
I shuffle?
No, no, let them shuffle.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a gunboat.
They're not really designed to shuffle.
They're fragile.
I'll do a shuffle and then you get to choose, all right? Yeah. Mm. Okay, you choose the one.
Okay.
Ah, okay,
House again.
thank you. 5 of earth, yes, Baal. Right, well those are 2 very interesting ones. Right, so let's start with Thor. Where's the card? There it is. So, Thor's the ace of earth. He was the god of the workers of the Scandinavian people, including the Anglo-Saxons, which I'm from, partly, the Norse peoples. And he had a magic hammer, which gets stuff done. It was also, he would fly through the air and come back to him. He had a beautiful wife who, you know, he could go home to at night. And he was protecting the gods in Asgard, using both a mixture of intelligence and strength. And he represents our ability to master the energies of the earth, if you want, but to do them properly. So nowadays, he would want us to live in harmony with nature and ecology. The green movement is very big in Scandinavia and in Britain as well, because people realise we can't go on misusing the resources of the earth. We have to live within our means and treasure nature. It's sacred. So the earth cards are about that. The card is given a picture which is interesting and tells a story. And it's a story about Loki, who was his rival. Loki tried to trick Thor into a drinking contest. I don't know if you know this story. So Loki was the sort of mischievous god, like the brother that's always causing trouble, right? And Thor was very popular with all the other gods. Loki wasn't really. He wasn't as strong, you know, but he was crafty. So he got Thor to a drinking contest challenge, and Thor had to drain this horn, drinking horn, which is what the Scandinavian people use. I have one here that was given me by a Norwegian, made of horn. It's a drinking horn, a small one. The one that Thor was asked to use was really big. It was like 12 feet long. So big it went out the end of the door of the hall where they were meeting. But Thor, no problem, you know, I can drink that. So he goes to drink it, and he drinks and he drinks and he drinks, glugs down, and then he gives up after 5 minutes because like the horn has only moved that much. The level in the horn has gone down by about 2 inches max. But at that point, Loki staggers back in disbelief. And his face turns white. And he says, "Do you realise what you've just done, Thor? You've just drained the Earth's surface of all the oceans by 2 inches. Because the horn was going out the door connected to the ocean." So Thor, as a god, had the ability to drink that much. And so